Hello guys. Hello guys. This is part 129 of ASP.NET video tutorial. In this video, we will discuss about cache dependencies on files in ASP.NET. If you have not watched part 128 of this video series, I strongly encouraged you to do so before continuing with this session. Let's understand cache dependency on files with an example. I have this XML file. Countries.xml, where I have a list of countries where each country has got ID, name, and continent. Now let's say I want to cache this XML data for 24 hours. But then within that 24 hours, if the XML data if this XML data changes for any reason, then I want that data from the cache to be removed immediately. Is that possible? Absolutely. That is what cache dependency is all about. Okay. Let's understand this with an example. Let's flip to Visual Studio. First, let's add that XML file. Where is our Visual Studio? Oh, let me see. My Visual Studio is here. Okay. Let's add a folder. Add. Where is the add? New folder. And name this new folder or data folder. And let's add an XML file. And let's add an XML to this data folder. So right click on that. And new item. Click on data. Here is the data tab. Data is here. Data tab. Select XML file. Here it is. Give it a meaningful name. I am going to call this countries.xml. So name it as countries dot xml. Click add. I have the XML data here already, so let's copy it. Where is the, go to the notepad and here it is. So I am copying paste it here, copying it from here and paste it here. And this XML data is pretty straightforward. XML data is pretty straightforward. We have countries, countries root, country roots node, and within that I have several countries where we have ID, name, and continent. Okay, so we have the XML file. Now on this web form, look at this web form. I have a button control, a grid view control, and a label control. So if you look at the source, the HTML source, the HTML source, I have this button, grid view, and label control. So obviously when I click this button, get countries, that is when we want to read the data from XML file. XML file, cache that and set the data set. Data set as the data source for the grid view control, data bind, and after we cache the data, anytime I click that button, get countries button, we want to retrieve this XML. So anytime I click that button, get countries button, we want to retrieve the XML data from cache rather than from XML file directly. So let's see how to do that. So I need to read the XML data. So click that. So I need to read the XML data, and the easiest way to do that is by using dataset. So let's create a dataset object. Let's create a dataset object. DS is equal to new dataset. And to read the XML data, we have read XML method. And to this method, we need to specify the path of the file. And to this method, we need to specify the path of the file, and we can do that using server.map path. Server.map path. Now we discussed about the significance of server.map path in the previous session of the ASP.NET video series. So if you are new to this method, server.map path method, I would strongly encourage you to watch that video. So the XML file is present in the data folder. So tilde indicates the current I mean the root directory of the web application, which in our case is demo. So within demo, so tilde, symbol tilde. So here the root directory of the web application. Tilde indicates the current root directory of the web application, which in our case is demo. So within demo, within data folder, I have this. Within data folder, I have this country.xml file. So copy the name and paste it here. And specify it here. So we have the data set ready. So we have the data set ready. Now what we need to do? We want to cache this. And obviously to cache a data set, there are several ways. We can use direct assignment, or we can use insert method, or we can use add method. We discussed about different ways to cache a data in the previous session of this video series. If you have not watched them, I strongly encourage you to do so. In this session, we use the insert method. So cache objects insert method. So cache object insert method. So cache object insert method. So I am going to use that, and obviously we have to specify the key. And obviously we have to specify the key for the cache. So I am going to call this countries data, and then obviously the data itself, in this case data set. So key is countries data, and obviously the data itself is, in our case, in this case, data set. And now look at this. The next parameter is the dependency parameter. And now look at that. The next parameter is dependency parameter. For now, let me pass null. For now, let me pass null. And then we can specify absolute expiration. And then we can specify absolute expiration date time dot now dot, let's say I want to cache this for 20 second. Date time dot now dot add seconds, let's say 20 second. Let's say I want to cache this for now for 20 second, and then sliding expiration, and then sliding expiration. Since we have specified absolute expiration, we don't have to specify sliding expiration. So I'm going to specify system.web dot caching dot cache dot no sliding expiration. Okay, all right. So we have cached. The data set as well. Now we need to set this data set as the data source for the grid view control. So we have the grid view control. Whose ID is gv countries dot data source. gv countries dot data source is equal to data set and gv countries dot data bind. All right, so we have done this. So this is happening on the button click. So every time we click the button, it is going to read that from XML file. So every time we click the button, it is going to read that from XML file, and then it is going to cache, that, We don't want that if the data set is already in the cache. We want to read it from cache. So we have to first check. So we have to first check. So we have to first check. Okay, if in the cache we already have data with this key, if in the cache we already have data with this key, countries data key, then retrieve that from the cache. So if that is not equal to null, then we know that the data is already present. So if that is not equal to null, then we know that the data is already present in the cache, in which case we want to retrieve it from there. So cache of countries we know that that is going to return a data set back. So cache of countries, let me copy this and paste it here. So cache of countries, we know that is going to return a data set back. So I am going to say data set ds data set ds is equal to data set ds is equal to whatever whatever we retrieved from the cache, is equal to whatever we retrieved from the cache. Okay, and then I want to set this as the data source for grid view control. And then I want to set this as the data source for grid view control. So I'm going to copy that and paste it there. And so I'm going to copy that and paste it here. Okay, and probably I want to display a message in the label. And probably I want to display a message in the label saying that we have got this rows from cache, row from cache. So label message dot text is equal to ds dataset dot tables 0 on tables of 0 dot rows dot count dot count, which will give us total number of rows. So whatever are the rows are retrieved from cache. Okay, so let's copy that and put that in the else block. Let's copy that and put that in the else block. So we have copied that message and paste it here. So if the cache is null, if the cache is null, if we don't have data in cache, then we want to read it from the XML file. Cache it and then set it as data source. Cache it and set it as data source. Okay, and then finally we want to display a message in the label saying that these rows are retrieved from XML file. Okay. So this message in the label will let us know whether we have retrieved it from cache or from countries.xml file directly. Okay. Look at this. At the moment we are passing null as the argument for cache dependency. Look at this. We are passing null as the argument cache dependency parameter. As the argument for cache dependency parameter. So there is no dependency whatsoever on the file. So let's go ahead and run this. So let's go ahead and run this now. Now, so we are caching this for 20 seconds. Let me save that and run this. So now, so we are caching this for 20 seconds. So first time when I click this button, it is, when I click this button, it is going to read the data directly from the XML file. I click that. So look at here, 5 rows retrieved from XML file. Now I click this again. 5 rows retrieved from cache. Now look at this, within 20 seconds, if I go ahead and change, for example, let's say Asia to Asia 1. Asia to Asia 1. And save it. And go to the browser. I come and click the get countries. Look at that, 5 rows retrieved from cache, though the XML file is changed. Now, maybe 20 seconds have passed. That is why the data set is removed from the cache. And I got the data from the XML file. And look here, it is changed Asia 1. But within those 20 seconds, after I have changed the file, when I click this get countries, the change did not reflect in the grid view control. That is because we are reading that data which is cached. Okay, but on the other hand, let's say whenever the data in the XML file changes, I want to remove the data from cache immediately. Okay, so for us that to happen, we need to establish a dependency on that XML file, and we do that and we do that using this dependency parameter, CacheDependency. Dependency parameter. Okay, so that's it. That is the CacheDependency parameter. So how do we establish that dependency? All we need to do is new CacheDependency. All we need to do is new CacheDependency. New cache dependency, and then look at that, all we need to specify and look at that. And look at that, all we need to specify, there is one constructor. There is one constructor uh, which takes just the file name, which take just the file name. So we want to establish a dependency on this countries.xml file on this. So we just need to specify the path of that XML file. So when that changes, immediately the data that is cache will be removed. Okay, so let's establish that dependency. Let's copy that from and paste it here. I think we need to specify using system dot caching. System.web.caching. Okay, so let me show you this again. So here it is need only. So look at there is only one constructor, which take just the file name, we just take the file name. So we want to establish a dependency on this XML file, countries.xml file. So we just need to specify the path of that XML file. So when that changes, immediately the data that is cache will be removed. Okay, so let's establish that dependency. Let's copy that from here. We have already copied it here from here and paste it here. And specify that here. So what are we doing along with specifying the, that is the file, that is the file. After we read that, after we read that, and then when we are caching that, we are saying Okay, there is a dependency on this. We are saying there is a dependency on this file. Whenever data in this file changes, we want to remove this data set. We want to remove that data set. We want to remove that data set from cache immediately. Okay, let's see if that happens. Actually, let's specify this 60 second. Actually, let's specify this 60 second. So that we will have some time to test. Okay, so now we are caching it for 60 seconds, but then there is a dependency on that XML file. Now, so let's go ahead and run this. First of all, need to close this, save this. Now let's go ahead and run this. So first time when we click the button, obviously it has to read from the XML file. So first time when we click this button, obviously it has to read from the XML file, and then it will cache. That within a dependency on that file. Okay, so get countries. Now look at this Asia one. And I click on that again. Look at 5 rows retrieved from cache within 60 seconds. No matter how many times you click, we get the same data. But then look at this. As soon as I change that Asia 1 to back to Asia, Asia 1 back to Asia, and I click this button, I get that, and I click this button, I get that, and look at the message 5 rows retrieved from XML file. So it is very simple. To establish a dependency on files in ASP.NET CacheDependency. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.